So I now come to the urgent question. Chris Elmore.
To ask the Secretary of State for Justice to provide an update on the situation in Parc prison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. Ensuring that our prisons are safe and secure for both prisoners and staff remains our priority. I want to extend my sincere condolences to the families and friends who have lost a loved one, and also my gratitude to the staff at HMP and YOI Parc. There have been 9 adult deaths at HMP Parc since March 2024. It's important to note that these deaths are not all drug-related. However, 4 have so far been linked to substance misuse, with another potentially so. Any death in prison is thoroughly investigated by the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman and is subject to a coroner's inquest. Until the results of these investigations are available, I must be a little careful not to preempt the detail of their findings or seek to comment on individual identifiable cases, so there will be a limit to what I can say with certainty. I am able to say that we believe that the 2 recent deaths this month have not currently been linked to substance misuse. The deaths at HMP and YOI Parc should be considered in the wider context of the threat synthetic opioids pose to HMPPS and those in our custody, and indeed to the country more widely, recognising the broader societal issue here. Our work at the prison can provide vital learning as we respond to this challenge, both in custody and the community, where I understand this challenge has also occurred. HMPPS and G4S, the operator of the prison, are working closely together using the latest technologies to gather intelligence on drug entry points and movement within the prison. There have been extensive searches of prisoners and staff. Any suspicious substances are tested on site with RappiScan. Drug amnesties have been run to improve safety, and X-ray scanners are being used on entry to prison. We have also expanded the use of naloxone at the prison, focusing on duty managers and night staff. Around 400 members of staff in total at HMP and YOI Parc are now trained to carry the drug during working hours. In addition, we also have specialist teams in HMPPS, including substance misuse group and intelligence supporting staff in the prison.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, may I just place on my thanks to you for granting this urgent question. And can I also thank the Minister for the genuinely constructive way in which he's engaged with me as one of the local members covering the prison site. It has been very welcome, and he's been extremely open with me as a constituency member. Can I also thank Heather Whitehead, the Governor of Parc, who has engaged with me over recent months as the deaths have been sadly increasing. My thoughts are, of course, with the inmates and their families who are no longer with us, and obviously every death is a tragedy, regardless of their circumstance. Mr Speaker, the Minister's made reference to the issues around spice in the prison. There is an absolute Wild West assumption around what is happening inside the prison, mainly through social media, but he touched briefly on what's happening across the Bridgend community. And one of the concerns is that the prison is a catalyst for spice being transferred in and out of the prison. So can he expand on what more work can be done with the MOJ, with Public Health Wales officials and with the Bridgend County Borough Council intervention teams to try and bring some sort of control to the drug abuse that is taking place inside and outside of the prison? I want to pay tribute to the prison staff who are working in what appears to be extremely difficult circumstances, with issues around staff-prisoner ratio numbers still not dealt with, and also to ensure that those prison officers who are having to deal with these deaths over the last 9 to 10 weeks are receiving the mental health support that they need to ensure that they are able to continue to work in what is some of the most difficult circumstances in one of the largest prisons in Wales. Also a Category B prison with significant challenges around some of the inmates that are housed in the prison. Finally, Mr Speaker, I'd be very grateful if the Minister could expand on some of the work with the Health Board. I've had some constructive meetings with health providers over recent weeks, but there does appear to be a disconnect between the realities on the ground in the prison and what the Ministry of Justice seem to be saying. So I'd be grateful for any update he can provide to try and bring some calm, not just to the prison estate, but to the wider Bridgend community.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And may I say I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for the typically measured tone he's adopted on what is a very sensitive subject. And I know one that he and I have spoken about previously. As I say, I join with him in thanking staff. I visited HMP Parc last month and met some of them for myself. It's also right, I think, to thank the broader system, if I can put it that way, the Health Board, the police, South Wales Police, and also put on record my gratitude to Leslie Griffiths for her engagement on this issue in the Welsh Government. And we look to work with all of those partners to tackle this, because there is a problem, challenge not just in the prison but also in the community. It is a shared societal challenge. The prison has put in place a strategy to tackle drugs, restricting supply, promoting recovery and seeking to reduce demand. A part of that is the coordination that is in place between G4S, HMPPS, Public Health Wales, the local health board, but also now bringing into that, or seeking to bring into that, the local police and indeed the local authority again, so there is shared ownership of tackling this. In terms of mental health support for staff, he's absolutely right to highlight that. The impact on those staff, just as on other prisoners, is significant when a death occurs in custody, and when there are a number of deaths in custody, that is amplified, and therefore we are putting in place the support to make sure that those staff feel supported and are supported. In terms of staffing that the Honourable Gentleman highlighted, I believe that there are currently around a dozen vacancies in staffing at the moment, but I would put on record that while we have significantly increased the numbers of staff there, I do recognise a number of those staff are new in post, and there is a need to ensure that they are supported by experienced officers to enable them to perform to the best of their ability. In terms of spice, as the Honourable Gentleman will know, I believe he's been briefed on aspects of this. Nitazines is something we're looking at, which is a variation of that. It's a very strong drug, and that is something we are looking at very carefully. But I can commit to continuing to keep him engaged and informed as the local Member of Parliament, alongside my honourable friend, the Member for Bridgend.
Chair of the Welsh Committee, Stephen Crabb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we should be clear that the numbers of fatalities that we've seen at HMP Parc this year is not by no means normal. It is quite an extraordinary situation. So I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker, that you've granted the urgent questions today. I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Ogmore for tabling it. The Minister knows there's been multiple allegations of staff themselves bringing in illegal substances into the prison, and indeed a current prisoner at Parc recently wrote to the Welsh Affairs Committee, and he said this: drugs are everywhere in prison, from cannabis to heroin and so-called spice. Dribs and drabs may enter through visits and some by way of drone, but let us not confuse the issue. Far more comes in by people employed in prisons. Given the answer that the Minister gave me last week to a written question, where he said that currently no prison staff are searched using X-ray body scanners, can he say why not? And in the absence of those kind of measures, what action he is taking to ensure that staff, all the staff who work in these difficult prisons, actually share in the safety culture and are not part of the problem?
My right honourable friend raises an extremely important point. The reality is, as he will know, the vast overwhelming majority of the staff who work in HMPPS do so honestly and with good intent. It is right that we continue to root out those that don't. And in that context, we continue to work with police forces around the country where prisons are located, but including in this case, to where there is evidence, take action against prison staff, not just prison officers, but any staff in the prison. More broadly, we have got body scanners in operation at this prison for visitors and others. We have also rolled out, alongside the RAPI scan system, whereby substances can be tested, handheld detectors that can be used in cell to track down drugs or locate drugs in a much more effective manner. There's considerable progress that I believe has been made, but we're very clear we need to continue making that progress, not just in HMP and YOI Park, but indeed across the estate.
Shadow Minister Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Ogmore for submitting this urgent question and for the constructive way in the way the Minister has replied. But this is the second time in a week that ministers have had to come to this House because of a crisis in one or more of our prisons. And I want to start by saying that we're all thinking of those who've died at HMP Parc and their family and friends and the Governor and her staff who work there. As this matter is currently under investigation, I appreciate we're limited in what we can say today. However, it is important that we give voice to this crisis. It was shocking that the prison's ombudsman had to warn prisoners at HMP Parc to throw away drugs immediately due to the severe risk that those particular ones posed to public health. I hope the Minister can outline what specific steps are being taken, and in fact he has done so, to remove drugs and ensure we don't have further unnecessary and tragic deaths. The Minister's promised action, but we don't want this to be yet another bout of activity happening after the fact, which doesn't last. Mr Speaker, drugs featured in the Chief Inspector of Prisons' urgent notification of Wandsworth Prison last week. He then went on to address, the Chief Inspector went on to address the chronic lack of national leadership from HMPPS and MOJ. We are looking at a national failure of leadership across our prison estate. Drugs are fueling the violence we see in our prisons. We are witnessing a crisis across the prison estate, a crisis of 14 years of Conservative rule. But in the spirit of today's question, I would like to thank the Minister's commitment, but I do want to ask him, will the action plan that he outlined just now continue once HMP Parc sinks from the headlines? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, the Shadow Minister, and if it is helpful, I will offer to write to her in the same terms as I've written to her honourable friend, just with some more information that I may not necessarily be able to say fully at the dispatch box. As she kindly acknowledged, I've set out the steps that are currently being taken to tackle this, restricting supply and tackling it at source, those scanners, those measures at the gate, and I know that there is, I understand it, a bid for enhanced gate security, which is currently being looked at and taken forward by HMPPS, which at the appropriate time I'm happy to update her on in the usual way. In terms of promoting recovery, the training that's been undertaken of around 400 staff in the use of naloxone, which is a drug which, when administered swiftly, can counteract the effects of, for example, nitazines, and I think that is an important step forward. And in terms of reducing demand, I know that we are working with at the prison, this is where Welsh colleagues will correct my pronunciation, Diffodol, which is an alcohol and drug treatment centre. Thank you. I'm grateful to the Shadow Minister for his correction of me. But we are engaging with them and indeed the Health Board, and we're also working with the Welsh Emerging Drugs and Identification of Novel Substances project, supporting that through prison radio and literature to seek to be as integrated and joined up in tackling what, as I say, Mr Speaker, is quite rightly a challenge for the prison, but also a challenge for the community as well.
Dr. Jamie Wallis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I just reiterate comments made by the Honourable Member for Ogmore about the way that the Minister is engaged, Mr Speaker. But can I just say, in Bridgend, this is more than just a few headlines. This is not the first time that the area has had to endure a spate of deaths like this in a very different setting, but still one that was worrying. And the Honourable Member for Ogmore touched on the social media speculation. It isn't just a case of some irresponsible people. There's genuine concern and genuine worry there about what it means for the communities, what it means for the town. Where does the buck stop? Where does the accountability line take us? Is it G4S? Is it the Ministry? Where does this go to the top?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Bridgend, and an issue he alluded to, which actually I failed to answer the Shadow Minister on, is to reassure her and indeed to reassure him that the focus on this will be sustained. even when the matter is not necessarily on the front page of the newspapers, because we recognise that the work needed is not something that can be done overnight. It takes sustained focus and sustained work from the team there. So I just wanted to reassure her, having omitted to do so. My honourable friend rightly alluded to the challenges that social media can pose in an already sensitive situation and what that can do in terms of exacerbating community concerns. I hope that some of what I have said today, going in so far as I could, will help reassure on some of those issues. In terms of his final point, I come back to what I said to the honourable gentleman, the member for Ogmore, which is I feel that this is essentially a shared responsibility between G4S, HMPPS, the council, the health board, the police and others, because this is a challenge for both the community and the prison, and the way that this is best resolved and best tackled, I think, is by working together in that spirit of cooperation.
The 9 deaths at HMP Parc in less than 3 months highlight how prisoner welfare in Wales is fragmented, with responsibility split between Welsh Government and the MOJ. Ultimately, of course, devolution of justice will streamline responsibility. But given that health is devolved, does he agree that deaths in prisons in Wales should be subject to scrutiny, both here, of course, and at the Senedd's Justice Committee?
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable lady for her question. I caveat slightly that we've got to remember that these deaths, I caveat it that we don't have final reports from the coroner or final findings from the PPA, but what appears to be the case is that these deaths have occurred from a range of causes, so I think we need to be a little bit cautious in respect to the conclusions we draw from that at this point. In terms of the underlying point she raises, she is right about the devolution of health, and that's why working with the local health board is extremely important in this context. But I do consider that the current arrangements around justice and scrutiny of matters relating to justice and prisons are adequate.
Mr. Speaker, a constituent of mine who's detained in the prison says he feels unsafe in Parc. He describes prisoners walking around with shanks just to feel safe. Now, the prison have said safety is a priority, but my constituents' parents feel their son is in danger. Staff will be very concerned also. This talk of knives being carried easily can't be right. So can I please ask the Minister, how many knives have been taken off prisoners in the last 6 months at Parc Prison?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. While I can't give him the exact answer he wants now, I'm very happy to write to him with that information. But I would go to his broader point about safety and assaults on staff or assaults on prisoners. Assaults on staff by prisoners remain too high, but are significantly down from where they were in 2016, 2017. But as far as I'm concerned, any assault on a member of staff is one assault too many. And similarly, the number of prisoner-on-prisoner assaults in custody at Parc, again, has come down significantly from where it was 2015, 16, 17, but again, remains too high. There's more to do, but I will happily, if I'm able to find the information or extract the information he wishes, write to him with that.
Christopher Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roughly 2/3 of prisoners arriving on the secure estate, we know, have suffered a brain injury before they arrive in prison. That can lead to poor executive functioning, anxiety, depression, all problems which can be massively exacerbated by being in prison. I understand that the MOJ wants all prisoners, when they arrive in prison, to be screened for brain injury. Is that happening at Parc? And are those people then getting the necessary support they need to be able to function as best as they possibly can, given those circumstances in prison?
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman and take the opportunity, if I may, to pay tribute to his campaigning work in respect of this issue, with which I've interacted with him in the past when I was a health minister. To his very specific question, in terms of Parc, it's important to remember, in the context of what is a very challenging issue we're discussing today, that Parc is generally a well-run prison, and one of the things that stands out there, and I saw when I went to visit, is the specialist neurodivergence wing and the work that's being done there with specialist trained officers and staff to understand the specific needs of those individuals in there. I'd encourage the Right Honourable Gentleman, if he wished, and with the permission of my honourable friend and his honourable friend, if he was ever at a loose end and able to visit, I think he would find what's going on there and the work that's being done there both encouraging and fascinating, and I'd encourage him to go.
Jessica Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I agree with what my honourable friend for Ogmore has said today? And one mother who's a constituent, and many have been in touch with our office in recent weeks, this morning said, every day I expect a phone call fearing the worst. Is my son going to be another statistic? Some of the parents, including this constituent, have raised concerns over a long period about drugs. Does the Minister understand that actions so far have done little to reassure those with loved ones in prison, and they need to know that the government is acting urgently?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she articulates understandable concerns by parents, by family and by others in a typically sensitive and measured way, and it's right that those voices are heard in this chamber. I hope that some of what I have said today will provide a degree or a little more clarity and a little more reassurance, but the other reassurance I can offer the Honourable Lady is that I will continue to take a close, direct and personal interest in ongoing work to resolve issues that may remain in Parc.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Well, we've all been saddened by events at Parc. So what assessment has the Minister made of the impact on the mental health of prisoners, both in Parc Prison and elsewhere, of staffing shortages, forcing prisoners to spend 23 hours a day in their cells and leaving them without access to appropriate rehabilitation courses? And what steps will he be taking to remedy this situation?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. In respect of Parc, I can offer her a reassurance that the regime there in time out of cell is in fact one of the most effective in the prison system, with extensive periods out of cell being facilitated. She talked about mental health quite rightly, and I think it's important in this context to remember, as she does, the mental health both of those prisoners, but also the prison staff and prison officers who are impacted by a death in custody. And we're working closely with the prison, and indeed the prison is working closely with the health board to ensure that this, among other things, is addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the inmates at HMP Parc was reported as having been moved there from HMP Exeter. Devon Live reported on a dangerous inmate who was moved to Parc after he threw boiling water in the face of an officer and attacked another prisoner with a tin opener without any warning or provocation. Does the Minister feel satisfied that officers and inmates will be safe from prisoners at HMP Parc?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. I set out earlier that while I consider assault rates to be still too high, they are lower than they were 2015-2016. And similar. It is very clear that any assault on a member of staff is one assault too many. Sadly, it does occur, as we know, across the estate, and that's why we are backing our staff with body-worn cameras, and indeed they have, for example, Parva, which they can deploy when they are at imminent risk.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers and for his helpful suggestions to all the members. Will the Minister confirm what steps can be taken to restore confidence in safeguarding and access to appropriate medical care whilst imprisoned in our prison facilities throughout this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as this has certainly raised questions regarding the levels of care and access to medical care in facilities, even though the result of an investigation may well be that there was no fault?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his question. It's an important question. I've set out the steps we are taking in Parc in terms of training staff to use naloxone, to be able to buy that precious time to enable medical services and professional medical services to arrive across the English and Welsh legal system and the prisons that come under the jurisdiction of me as Prisons Minister. It is, of course, the case that in Wales, healthcare is devolved, and in this country, in England, healthcare in prisons is provided and is the responsibility of the NHS. So we seek to ensure we have effective and close working relationships with both those organisations, both at a macro level but also at an operational level within prisons with their local health board or local NHS.
Right, that completes the urgent question. The front bench is clear.